A grand ballroom floated in candlelight at the center of an old European palace, where crystal chandeliers hung like frozen constellations above polished black marble floors, and soft violin music moved through the air with a kind of elegance that made even silence feel rehearsed, while couples dressed in velvet, silk, and quiet ambition moved in perfect circles beneath golden light, smiling with the confidence of people who believed they understood devotion, romance, loyalty, and the fragile architecture of human connection. And yet beneath the beauty, something heavier moved unnoticed, something older than love itself. Because love rarely begins with honesty, it often begins with need, and need, when dressed beautifully enough, is rarely questioned. And on that evening, philosophers, aristocrats, artists, widows, lovers, and quiet observers gathered not merely to celebrate affection, but to discuss what gives human connection meaning. And at the center of that ballroom, untouched by the rhythm of music around him, stood Friedrich Nietzsche, calm, observant, as if he were not watching people fall in love, but watching them negotiate loneliness. And that difference did not go unnoticed, because people become aware of stillness most clearly when they themselves are performing happiness. And one of the younger men nearby, elegantly dressed, his hand resting lightly on the shoulder of the woman beside him, finally looked toward Nietzsche and asked a question that sounded romantic on the surface, but carried something far heavier beneath it, asking whether love truly makes people stronger, whether devotion makes people whole, and whether giving your heart to another person is the highest form of human courage. And the question moved quietly through the ballroom like perfume through candlelit air, because everyone who heard it recognized something personal within it, and love, unlike philosophy, rarely feels abstract, and Nietzsche did not answer immediately. And that silence created something unusual, because in places built for intimacy, silence feels heavier than music, and heavy silence forces attention. And when he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost soft in the violins echoing across the marble walls, and he said that most people do not fall in love. They fall in to escape. And the words did not land like romance. They landed like exposure. And exposure, when aimed at the heart, is never easily ignored. And the ballroom, once filled with warmth, no longer felt entirely safe. The music did not stop. The violin still moved softly through the candlelit hall. The couple still turned in elegant circles beneath crystal chandeliers and golden light. And yet, somehow, everything had already begun to feel different. Because once a thought begins to move inward, the world outside often becomes quieter, not because it changes, but because attention moves somewhere deeper, somewhere less comfortable, and the lovers, artists, philosophers, and silent observers moving across that polished marble floor felt that shift, even if they could not fully explain it, because something had been introduced that did not fit with the comfort they brought with them. And when comfort begins to weaken, awareness begins to grow. And awareness is rarely gentle, because awareness does not remove love. It removes the stories people use to protect what they call love. And the people surrounding him felt that pressure begin to build, not outwardly, but inwardly, because now the question was no longer about romance. It was about why love so often feels incomplete without possession, and personal questions are always harder to escape than philosophical ones. And the young man who had spoken earlier slowly released his hand from the woman beside him, his smile no longer effortless, his eyes no longer entirely certain. And after several silent moments, he looked toward Friedrich Nietzsche again, this time without charm, without performance, and asked what exactly. People are escaping when they fall in love, and the question carried something new. Not resistance, not challenge, but vulnerability. And vulnerability is always more honest than certainty, because it appears when something real has finally been touched. And Nietzsche answered calmly, saying that most people do not seek another person. They seek relief from themselves. The music did not stop. The violin still moved softly through the candlelit hall. The couple still turned in elegant circles beneath crystal chandeliers and golden light. And yet, somehow, everything had already begun to feel different. And the words moved through the ballroom differently this time, because they did not explain attachment. They exposed dependence. And exposure is far more difficult to resist than contradiction, because contradiction creates defense, but exposure creates reflection, and reflection is slower, heavier, and far more difficult to escape. And Nietzsche continued, saying that many relationships do not begin with admiration, but with hunger. Hunger for attention, hunger for safety, hunger for validation, hunger for someone who can temporarily silence the part of ourselves we never learned to face alone. And the words settled into the hall with quiet weight, because they did not describe love as weakness. They described it as negotiation. And negotiation is something people rarely recognize within affection, because what feels like passion often hides fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of emptiness, fear of silence, fear of becoming invisible, and the dancers felt that idea begin to move through them, not as agreement, but as tension. Because now love was no longer something written in poetry, no longer something promised beneath candlelight, no longer something protected by rings, vows, or beautiful language. It had become something far more personal, something internal, something that reached beyond the ballroom itself. And one of the women standing near the edge of the dance floor slowly lowered her glass, her expression harder to read than before, and asked whether devotion itself could become another form of ownership. And the question hung beneath the chandeliers longer than expected, because everyone standing nearby recognized something personal within it. And Nietzsche looked toward her, not with sympathy, not with cruelty, but with clarity, and said that love becomes dangerous the moment another person becomes a place where your identity lives. And the words moved deeper than anything before them, because they removed the comforting illusion that being chosen automatically creates wholeness, that being needed automatically creates meaning, that being loved automatically creates freedom, and instead they placed responsibility where most people least want it, within themselves. And the dancers fell quiet, not because they agreed, but because something within them had already begun to shift, something that could not be undone through denial alone. And Nietzsche, seeing that shift, did not push harder, did not raise his voice, because the ballroom had already done enough. And instead he said that the deepest chains are rarely made of iron. They are made of affection that was never meant to become identity. The music did not stop. The violin still moved softly through the candlelit hall. The couple still turned in elegant circles beneath crystal chandeliers and golden light. And yet, somehow, everything had already begun to feel different. And the words settled into the candlelit hall with quiet finality, because what they were feeling was not romance. It was something far more unsettling, a quiet realization that some of the people they called love may have simply been places they were hiding. And for the first time, the music no longer felt like intimacy. It felt like exposure. The music did not stop. The candles still burned. The crystal chandeliers still scattered golden light across polished marble and carefully rehearsed smiles. And yet, somehow, none of it felt the same. Because something had shifted, not in the ballroom, not in the slow circles of dancers moving beneath the music, not in the whispers, glances, or elegant hands pretending to hold each other with certainty, but in the way love itself was now being understood. And that difference was enough to change everything. Because once a person begins to understand love differently, love itself no longer feels as innocent as before, and the people standing beneath those golden lights felt it, even if they could not fully explain it. Because something had been introduced that did not require agreement to exist, something that had already begun to alter the way they understood devotion, romance, loyalty, attachment, and the invisible bargains each of them had made long before they ever called it intimacy. And that alteration is what makes an idea dangerous. Not because it destroys affection, but because it removes excuses. And Friedrich Nietzsche stood calmly within that silence, not as someone untouched by love, but as someone who had stopped asking love to complete what it had not yet created within himself. And that difference was impossible not to notice, because dependency comforts people, but wholeness transforms them. And the young man, who had spoken first, looked toward him again, his voice quieter now, stripped of performance, stripped even of charm, asking what happens to those who discover that the people they love were never truly the problem, only the places where they hid from themselves. And the question carried something new, not resistance, not challenge, but honesty. And honesty is always heavier than certainty, because it appears when performance finally ends. And Nietzsche answered calmly, saying that losing someone is painful, but losing yourself to keep them is fatal. And the words moved to the ballroom with a kind of quiet force, because they did not glorify heartbreak. They stripped love of performance. And performance is what most people hide behind when intimacy becomes too personal. And Nietzsche continued, saying that many people claim they want love, but what they often mean is that they want relief, relief from silence, relief from loneliness, relief from uncertainty, relief from the unfinished parts of themselves they never had the courage to face alone. And the dancers felt that idea settle into them with quiet weight. Because now love was no longer something to chase, no longer something to display, no longer something to be admired from a distance. It had become something to survive without losing yourself inside it. And survival is far heavier than romance. Because romance asks you to feel, but real love asks you to remain whole while feeling deeply. And that is what most people fear more than heartbreak itself. And the ballroom fell silent. Not because anyone agreed, but because something within them had already begun to shift, something that could not be undone through denial alone. And Nietzsche walked slowly toward the tallest mirror in the hall where candlelight burned softly across endless reflections. And without turning back, he spoke one final time, saying that the strongest love is not finding someone who makes you feel complete. It is meeting someone who refuses to let you remain incomplete. The music did not stop. The candles still burned. The crystal chandeliers still scattered golden light across polished marble and carefully rehearsed smiles. And yet, somehow, none of it felt the same, and the words settled deeper than anything before them, because they did not promise romance. They demanded growth. And growth is always heavier than affection, because affection asks to be held, but growth asks to be seen. And no one spoke after that, because there was nothing left to defend. Nothing left to romanticize. Nothing left to hide behind. And as Friedrich Nietzsche disappeared slowly into the golden reflections of endless mirrors and fading candlelight, the dancers remained exactly where they were, and yet none of them felt the same. Because once a person realizes that love was never meant to rescue them, only to reveal them, they cannot fully return to the comfort of who they used to be.